Hi all. Welcome to DrupalSouth. This is the first session on the web tools and complementary technologies track. So let me introduce Jimmy. Jimmy flew all the way from Atlanta, USA to present this session. So hopefully you will learn something new and interesting, I guess, from this session. So managing attendance efficiently can be a challenge, and especially in large organizations and events. In this session, Jimmy from Georgia Tech will take us through how this team built an RFID-based check-in system using Drupal. This system streamlines event management and enhances user experience while leveraging modern web tools. Please join me welcoming Jimmy to the stage. Thank you.
All right, hey everyone. My name is Jimmy Kriegel, and this is how Georgia Tech built an RFID check-in system in Drupal. And this is what the students see whenever they come up to check into everything. I animated this cat with the best that I could, and using our little buzz card. That's what we call our card. Our card. And so a little bit about me. I work for Georgia Institute of Technology. That's in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a very long flight, but very worthwhile to get over here. And thank you guys for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys. I'm the lead IT engineer in the Office of International Education. I'm in a unique position because I only work for just our department of OIE, or Office of International Education. And so I do everything from fixing computers to all the way up to building software and looking for solutions. And my goal and what I like doing is taking and getting rid of any paper process and digitizing it. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I got about 12 years of experience in Drupal, and I also have a master's in cybersecurity. So a little bit about our Office of International Education. So we handle all of the international students and scholars that come into our campus. We've got around 6,500 at any given time. And we have different agreements with everyone. We have quite a few here in Australia, partners and exchanges where we'll send some of our students and we'll accept some of the other ones. We also have study abroad and global internships that come out of our office. We also have this international plan degree designation. And so that's where students can get it kind of like a minor on their undergraduate degree, where they need to study abroad twice and learn a new language. And then we also have these living learning communities where we take exchanges or international students and we house them together with American students and foster a lot of creativity. And so one of our main goals with the international education is to really grow and build globally minded citizens and just show them more about what's out there in the world. And some of that also goes to the staff, where I can come and talk to you guys about what we do, and I can learn a lot about your culture and take that back as well. So Georgia Tech, we really love Drupal and we use it a lot. I created during the pandemic a virtual drop-in system where we leverage web forms, and then we send that off to OS Ticket, which is open source ticket, and then we put our students into a Zoom. And then they can be able to get help when the campus was closed and people were kind of scattered throughout, so they can still keep their immigration status and get the help and support they need. We also have an agreement database, and so that's all of our university agreements or memos and exchange programs. And then at the whole campus, we have a campus news and event feed where you can go to this website on Drupal, submit your events, submit your news, and then it propagates out through using kind of based on the feeds module to propagate to all different websites of different colleges and different departments. And then we also have something new coming out, which is our emergency notification, where if there's anything that happens that the police need to update campus of storms or anything else, they can type up a message, press send, and all those sites will check in periodically and then post that to the top banner of the information they need. So we really try to use Drupal as much as we can. A lot of our office and our campus is decentralized for web. So we have a communications group that kind of work on building some of the theme, but individually is based on, or the support and how stuff gets developed is kind of dependent on the different colleges or the different units on there. So bringing us to our challenge, updating our outdated attendance tracking. So as everyone knows, if you ever go to a doctor or you go to anywhere and you have a sign-in sheet, it's just not great. You have to sign in, you have to, everyone hates now writing with their hands, unless you're over a certain age and you love using cursive because they stopped teaching cursive for us. You do that, you sometimes can see the person's name in front of you. So if you're at the doctor's office, I look at that, I'm like, oh, this is like a security nightmare. You can just see the next person name's up there. Then you hand it over to the person. Then they try to read it. You don't have good handwriting. They can't read it. Especially when we had this in our office and we have international names and we're mispronouncing it, not because we're trying to, but because no one can read anyone's cursive handwriting. And now we're starting off on the wrong foot. And on top of that, it's just a manual piece of paper. So someone's going to have to either digitize that or go back through and check off that they're there. And there's no way to do this in an efficient manner. And you also can't follow up with any of the attendees. There's no way, because it's like maybe a month from now or a couple of weeks if someone manually goes through and copies and pastes it and checks them off or then does some follow-up. But it doesn't work that way. So I thought this is a place that I can be creative and innovate a solution. So the solution was to kind of create this super easy RFID system. So all of our students have, call them buzz cards, and there's their student ID cards. And on there has like their 900 number, their student ID number, and has their name. And everyone has this. And so it's super easy, especially if you can just do tapping. And just like, everywhere I go here and just pay, I don't see anyone using the old chip and put the card in there unless they're really foreign or they don't know what's going on. It's super easy to tap. And so while they do have a magnetic strip on there, and I did investigate using that to get people to take their card out, or right now they can also just have it in their wallet or on their phone and just tap from far away, it just works. For the magnetic strip, it's cheaper, it's easier to use, but people still have to swipe. And sometimes if you don't have the magnetic strips that can go on both sides, you're just doing one or the other. And then a lot of times there's a queue because we're trying to really push for our event check-in system to get people through as quickly as possible. So the tap just kind of just works. So we just tap on there, here's a nice audible beep, and it knows it has a confirmation message that you can see on there. It's like, you're checked in, and then just kind of moves on to the next one. The other thing is when we put it into Drupal, we now have a secure data storage. And when we have that, we also, the second part of it is, we now have been able to export that to Dropbox. And that's where we have an enterprise license with Dropbox. So then we can manipulate the data and send that off to our CRM or our mailing list or do whatever else we need to do with that. And with this system that I built, it's scalable for different types of events and different use cases. And we'll kind of go through and talk about some of these. So there's two modules I created to solve this problem. The first one was the GTED check-in module. And so that's just a front-end check-in block that just shows kind of what we saw on the previous slide. Users can just tap, put their ID in the system. If all the inputs are valid, it submits it off, and we'll come back and we log that to a CSV file. We could do something more where we log that into a node, but that's more complex and we don't necessarily need that. So for me, sometimes the simplest solution is the easiest solution, and we can always scale that up if we need to. But having a CSV is super easy to do any queries or do any manipulation we need to inside Drupal or outside of it. And so that's the first part. We got that working, got that tested by people, and then it's like, well, we need to get the data off. And so when I started looking around, I did find that there was Dropbox modules, but it's more to take your stuff from Dropbox and put it into Drupal. And I had the opposite problem. I wanted to take some of my data and move it off. And there was a couple reasons for that. One is we host a photo contest each year where people submit through web forms and put on their different experiences that they've had either on campus or when they studied abroad. We pick winners. They get to have that up in a gallery in the library, but then we also create calendars. And so it's a good way to kind of foster creativity that our students can engage in. So when we do that, we have to kind of refine and look at all of those things. And so having something like this would be easier than them telling me, okay, we're going to close that out. Can you go SFTP into the Drupal site, pull down the whole folder, and then we'll sort it somehow. So something like this could solve the issue right away. So this is just built on the Dropbox API for PHP. And let's see. Yeah, so it's just kind of easy to move and collect the data when we have these kind of two. So the buzz card was an interesting challenge to kind of break apart and learn. So these are just proximity cards, probably the same thing you might have at work or like a hotel. The whole concept of just tapping it and it just works and stores information on there. What we did find is that, the students have a student ID, and that's just not tied to a card, but there's actually a Prox ID. And so all of that's stored in a database at the central card office. So having both of those and getting access to that was a little bit of a challenge to convince them, no, we're using this data appropriately and answering a lot of their security questions and doing that. But how we had to kind of use some different tools, if anyone's familiar with the Flipper Zero or the middle image is the Proxmark 3, to do a lot of testing to figure out what tool we need to get, which turned out to be this PC Prox card, and I actually brought one with me today. And so it's just nice, it's USB, it acts like a keyboard, so you can just plug this in. So basically the idea is for us to run our events, they just have a laptop up near. If we're not doing a mandatory session, we just have a laptop and we just open up the Drupal webpage, plug this in, and let the students tap. They get a nice confirmation message, and the next student comes in. If we're doing something with like mandatory orientation, so like if we were doing it with you guys today, I would have someone over at the end, and everyone would just line up in a queue, and they would tap and just move on, and then we would check them off on the back end saying, yes, everyone came to Jimmy's talk. Great. So some more information about the module. So again, the users can just go there, or actually, more for the staff, they would just navigate to this block, and I showed that. They can input either their GTID, which is their student ID card, or their buzz card number, which would just be a tap. And the reason I had to do both of those was students lose their ID cards all the time or don't bring it anywhere, which is crazy to me because they need this to get into their dorm room. So I don't know, between them leaving and coming to our event, they just don't have that. So it's like, okay, we had to write in that they can type in their 900 number to get that. And so all of that, what we do is we tie that into an LDAP query and send that off to the card office and then get back data. And again, there's a lot of sanitation of data, a lot of other checks that I'll kind of go into on there. But if everything's good, we'll go ahead and log all of that to the CSV file, the timestamp and IP, their name, their GTID, and also the buzzcard ID. And so each day, just for simplicity, we're just going to log a new file with that on there. So that kind of raises a slight issue. It's like, well, what happens if we have multiple events, and if we're just logging each day, shouldn't we do it more event-based? Yes and no. Yes, we could do that, but because we're using Drupal and it's super easy to scale, we can just throw these two modules up on all the different websites that our office has. And so each group can now access and run these independently. And all they need to do is just check out one of these from our front office and take this to their event. So that kind of solves some of these problems on there. But we'll still go into some of these other challenges that I have to think about a lot. And so me having a cybersecurity background, I always like to think, what would the bad guys do to break and wreak havoc into the system? Whereas some of the other people I work with that are more developers, they're always like, I want to build these beautiful sandcastles. And I'm always thinking, how can I break into the sandcastle? So, some of the requirements are it needs to just work instantly. So we couldn't put something, since this is web-based, and if anyone really had the URL, we couldn't just put, okay, now we do a captcha, pick out all the bicycles on this and stuff. It's like, that's not going to work if, we're doing a mandatory orientation where everyone needs to just queue up and just go quickly. We need to get people, every 1.5 to 2 seconds, they tap their card and just kind of keep moving through. The other thing is we don't need to have too much information. So each of our work groups might need different information at different times. Most of the basic stuff we collect is probably even too much, and we can kind of dumb it down just to their name or their email address that kind of contains their username in there. So that's another opportunity to be better stewards with our data and with our students to just have more protection on there. The worst thing I ever want is to have like a data leak and be it something that I built or something that we have that was controllable. It's like, well, we don't even need to collect that. So I'm constantly going through and doing audits on our site and saying, why are we asking our students for this information, even if they're still using a paper form or something? It's like, we already know this. We don't need triple confirmation on there. We're not doing medical things where, they always ask you your date of birth and your name to make sure they have the right file and stuff like that. The other thing we needed is, since Drupal's on the web, our websites, we need to have a way to restrict it so it's just, you can access this just on campus. The other thing is using secure data storage. Like, how are we going to store the files in Drupal so that they're in a safe place? The other thing is always a big thing is make it simple for staff to do, because I can dream up and start building something super creative, but if the staff don't have buy-in for it, they're not going to use it. And we also need to have friendly error messages, both for the staff and for the students, in case it's a smaller event and we just have a laptop in the corner that students are self-serving and they just check in. So if they get a message, it should be friendly enough, and we should also log that message so we can look and see what stuff we need to change. So here's some of the solutions I came up with. And the right side is what the module looks like for the settings page, and it's a little small. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. The top one says like collect the GTID number. We can turn that on or off. And then collect the buzz card number, which is the prox ID. Turn that on or off. And then we also have mask the student ID. So when we look at this, if a staff member maybe doesn't need access, or maybe a student is running the event on behalf of a staff member, we don't just expose that information if the students were to just look at the event page after they log in. So again, kind of this security mindset, let's make sure we're always protecting people and protecting their information. And then below that is the storage path. And so by default, I wrote it in that you can only use the private file path that you have to set up in Drupal settings. So you can't do anything public, because that would just be a nightmare if you figured out the naming convention of /files and then month, date, year.csv, and then that's just easily accessible, even if we do have it on campus, that someone could just sit there and write a script and just hammer away on that. So the other thing on there is allowable IP address ranges. So the default would be just let's block everyone and then manually add that in. The great thing about how we have our campus network set up is, depending on what your role is at there, if you're a student or staff or faculty or you live on dorms, you get a different range of IP addresses. So it's really easy for me to go and look up the list and just add in stuff that our staff would use, or the different buildings where we operate out of. So that way we can just turn off access so that no one's sitting in their dorm room just like, oh, I wonder what this random number is, and just kind of hitting our server and just trying to ping this back and forth. The other thing is utilizing Drupal's permission-based settings. So that's really important to write that in, that I built in, that some staff members or some student workers can look at stuff, but they won't be able to edit the settings and change stuff, but they can maybe look at this and upload it to Dropbox. So having that and always adding some of these fine-grained permission details does make a difference. And sometimes it took me coming across situations where a staff had too much access, and it's like, well, maybe they don't need that. And again, because we have these two modules, I'm not just thinking about, okay, I can just put this on one website. I can just scatter this about and have different websites have different permission levels for different staff. So depending on what their groups are, so we can kind of have these different ways to control access to that. And then again, I think I talked about a little bit about that, about the client and server side verification. So friendly error messages and JavaScript. And then for server side, we'll make sure we're doing PHP data sanitation. And then again, we do another check before that we're only passing, numbers on there, either 9 or 11 digits to pass to the LDAP query. So we're not worrying about any sort of escape characters or anything like that. Always better to think about the security side for these kind of things. And then data integrity. So I kind of talked about it just a second ago of between the 9 to 11 digits. And like, this is the message and the picture, what you get if you're not on the right network, it won't even propagate the form. And so from there, I'm working on a different version where if it's a staff member and they have access, they get to this page and like, oh no, they can quickly add a button and it will just grab their IP and put that in there as like a 30-minute thing, and maybe it'll send me a message, or worst case, we just have the range kind of figured out and dialed in a little bit better. So we want to log all of the successful check-ins and even some of the failed ones. So as students being students, they tend to lose their cards. And so when they lose their card and they get a new one, which they have to pay some money for, it can take a little while for that number to propagate in the system. They'll still be able to access, like their dorms or pay for their food. But for us, when we do our queries, sometimes it just comes back as blank. That's okay. We still want to log that because a day later we can rerun that query and get that student's information because they came and checked in. So we always want to log everything that happens, and then using Drupal's watchdog and logging any errors, warnings, access denied is huge, because that's another layer of accountability that we can go through if there's any problems or anything like that. So here's what the view page check-in looks like. I just did myself. I didn't want to try to blur out a bunch of other students or staff members on there. But we just kind of have the name, email address, the IP address it came from, timestamp. So that's good for drilling down in case there's multiple events of the same one, or if we're using two different laptops, we can kind of see if there's one at two different sides of the room or two different things going on at once. It's easy still with that group, if they're not using different websites, to kind of distinguish between what's going on. And so we have an NA for the GCID and the buzz card because I turned off the data collection for this site so that we don't need that and it won't show up there. And something else I did was we made if this is like the day after the event, you can go and use this little calendar and find when your last event was. Now, I could have printed a list and just do a directory dump of here's all the events on this list, and then you can go back through. But because I always want to err on the side of security in case somehow that someone does start poking around or get access, they would have to know what date in question to go through the list on there. And so I'm not 100% sold on that idea, but sometimes if you can just put some small barriers on there, it's kind of like security cameras. Like they're not going to prevent a crime from happening, but sometimes they'll just give an extra level of notice or something you can go back through on there. So if this isn't the right date and someone else wants to go back and look at something, they can change the date, click search check-in, and then it'll propagate. And what it does, it goes and reads the CSV file and loads it up and prints it on there. So now we have the data on here. We need to be able to extract it. And talked a little bit about why we wanted to extract that. And that's really because we want to take some of that data, we can move them off, we can put them into our CRM or to our mailing list. A perfect example is tracking the life cycle of a student that maybe wants to study abroad. So maybe we have an open house, they check in, we get them, we can put them on a mailing list saying, interested. And then if they complete the next step, we can kind of manually see, oh, we already had them in the interested mailing list, let's move them over to the other one, or through our CRM and mark them. Because a big thing we've found is we'll have students always come through, but we don't know why they never completed and actually studied abroad. Is it financial rating? Is it the classes that were offered at partner institutions weren't enough? Like we don't know. And it's hard to find what we don't know until we have data to kind of back that up. So this was a perfect addition to there that we can kind of now check in stuff, taking this manual process, digitizing it, and now we actually have data so we can make data-driven decisions on there. So this is based on a Dropbox API. I don't know if this is official or not, but that's where I based on mine, and so we'll just install that library. You go to the dropbox.com, and they have an app place where you can register your app. And you need to whitelist your Drupal site. So I had to whitelist a bunch of our sites that are running this. You'll get a nice little message like this whenever you check in to grab an authentication token. And then after you have that authentication token, you'll see a message saying, great, your authentication token is valid. You can upload this on there. And so some of the permissions that we had to set up was that the console would only read files inside the app. So if you ever used any Dropbox apps, it makes under your account apps folder, and then it makes the name of your app on there. And so we wanted to just make sure we're not reading everyone's Dropbox folder, but just anything on there, and also have the ability to append and rewrite over that data as if someone ran an event early and they pressed it too soon, and then they wanted to go back through and redo that. Or as you'll see, I have a button to just do a mass upload if there's just no one has uploaded the files in a long time. So here's the settings for this. Again, we want to point to the private folder. And so when I started building this Dropbox file one out, I really was like, well, this needs to be a lot more be in synergy with the other check-in one. So I kind of added some more hooks that if the other one is installed, you can kind of point to where these folders need to go, and it kind of will now show up with that. And we'll see that on the next slide. But you just basically get the app key and secret and be able to request the token. And so here's where some of the stuff based on your role that you have on our Drupal site, that you'll have this whole new section show up, and it's this Dropbox file upload, and you'll see there's the path of which one you have selected. You can upload this current event, you can upload all events, you can ask for an Dropbox authentication token, or you can configure the settings. So there is a slight issue that I've come across, and that's just because I didn't think far enough ahead that multiple people that in a work group might be using the same site. So if that happens, right now the OAuth token is just stored in Drupal and not stored per user. So if I log into one site and I say, oh, okay, let me upload this event, then I go drop over to the next site that I need to do, well, my OAuth token is still on the first site, and so then I have to resubmit and re-get a new token. So there can be a little bit of conflict on there. Again, it's just more of you'll just get a stale token and just have to refresh that. So that's on my roadmap to fix, to make it that the token would be stored in the user's account and not just for Drupal altogether. So kind of our case study on there is, we had a good testing on this. We have International Education Week where we had about 85 different events for the whole week of November. And this was a big showcase where we had like 5 or 6 laptops going at once, all checking in at different events firing. I used to worry about collision for having a CSV being written on there, but those were the PHP 5 days. If anyone was still using it then, with 8.3, you don't really have to worry about that. And it's made a huge difference. We're able to give live data and give reporting up to our leadership and say, hey, these events are working. Here's the data right here, and not more of, okay, let me go look at the sign-in sheet. Okay, we had 85 people. Now I can tell you if there's any duplicates. We can just do a lot more stuff. It's easy to move some of the stuff off to our CRMs. So we have one for immigration to keep all our students legal in the U.S. while they're here studying. And then we have another one for study abroad. And then we have another one for some of the degree designation, and then just more adding to the mailing list. So, and I mentioned the life cycle of the students and how that we can track and we can find where they fall through. So kind of what to take away. Drupal added it's like a security blanket where I could have created this just as a web app on its own, but I would be scared to death to kind of release that because there's so many things that, Drupal and the open source community, that they're always looking out for vulnerabilities and patching and anything else. Even my module, I could submit that and have it formalized and get asked for security groups to renew or to review it and look at that. And that's huge, especially for open source community. Like if this was on my own, I'd probably have to hire a company or something like that. And the flexibility that Drupal has in your module building is that you can leverage and make them interconnect and talk to them. And you can always kind of learn along the way. I've been doing Drupal for about 12 years now, and I was really hesitant to kind of branch out and do this stuff, but just finding problems or something that you want to solve and just slowly building blocks and learning and really coming to these conferences and going to different talks, that always is how I was inspired. And I was at DrupalCon Barcelona last year where I got this idea after going to a session, which I can't even remember. I just kind of like, oh, this is something I could do. And when you're around other people that are in Drupal, and for me, we have a small community at Georgia Tech, but when I get to connect with a bigger group and see what people are doing, or it helps spur ideas and like, oh, this is a problem I didn't even think about and how we can kind of do that. So again, before we go into the QA, it's efficient, security, scalability. I don't know. It's a huge success for me, and I've been pushing that to all of our other peers and campus partners to say, hey, we have this tool now, and you can run it at Georgia Tech, and I have all the tools for that, and so kind of spreading the news on that. So we'll take some questions. Here's the link to the slides, and you can email me or come up and talk to me if anyone has any questions. Yep. I can't really see too well, so I'm just going to, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I had that when I went through it earlier. I was doing a practice. I was like, oh yeah, NFC. So that is the next thing, because we do have a couple institutes that are in Georgia that are they just use their phone as their ID card now. So I mean, if that's the case, we'll leverage that. I mean, I'm always an early adopter of technology, and I think we can figure that out and run that on there. But, the other thing is that we can do is, and I brought this, is like, this is just USB, and I had USB-C, and I can just open up our website, and, it's a little clunky. I was going to 3D print a case for it, but, I can just take this and just tap, and it shows I'm checked in. So it's just like, it works now. So now you don't need to have a laptop in the corner. I can just give this out to anyone who has a somewhat modern phone that has USB-C, and they can just walk down the line and just tap, and it's like it completely changes that. And the other thing is, so the card office does let you rent cards that you can tap to do stuff, but they were charging, I don't know, like $30 each time for each event, and I was like, I can do this for basically free. I mean, these things, I was lucky, and I found the right ones, and this was about 20 to 30 US dollars each. And I got greedy and I found some more, and then they sent me the wrong one. So I was like, so I got about 6 of them. So that's pretty good for a card. But yes, I think we'll switch over to that because NFC is the next thing on there. And I think they're already testing having cards on there, and that's the new thing for security and door control, because these ones are just stored as unencrypted ones. So someone could easily just come by and clone them and then just have that. But yeah, good question. Yeah.
So how students have that?
Not so much because I'm not directly advertising. It's something I'm keeping really close, and I think I can be okay to an extent with the IP whitelisting. I could probably also just put more timer based where it would only open up, like taking something out of our what web forms has. Like it's only open for certain times. Some of that would just require that the staff, because I'm always like constantly juggling like what stuff do we want, because like we could have a laptop that the staff would sign in and they would set up and create an event, and like they would like, okay, open the event now, and then they close it. But more times than not, the staff's going to leave the site open and they're logged in to the Drupal site, and like that's not going to really work. Like yes, that will, because they can maybe keep an eye on a laptop and someone would have to physically take it. But I'm constantly juggling of like, how do I find things that work, but also that I can trust the staff to do? Because if I give them 10 checklist things to do, they're going to do like 3, and then it's like, okay, well, you just kind of left the barn door open on there. So I haven't noticed too much stuff, but that's why I always try to like log stuff in Drupal as well, and just try to have more stuff that I can kind of see on the background. I don't think too many people know about that there is a way to kind of do these queries on there. I mean, again, yeah, the mag strip, I mean, they could do that. That's for their meal swipes as well. So, that's, super easy for people to do if they're into that. Plus, we also are a technology school, so they're already doing stuff like that all the time and like, cloning that. So I think at some point, they'll probably switch over. Probably next year, they'll be like, okay, we're going to do NFC and it's encrypted now, and switch all the doors over. That's the problem, though, is, when you have a campus with, about 100 buildings, so that's, probably 600 doors. They're not going to spend all that money. They're like, okay, we're going to spend $3 million redoing all of our doors because of this. They're going to do it so slow. And so they're probably just going to do the dorm rooms first, and then they'll start doing other classrooms, and then they'll probably slowly roll out. Like about 10 years ago, they had the barcode on there, like a library, and I had a barcode reader, but it's so hard. Unless you're a cashier and you know your game about swiping things, having a student kind of go up and do this, and then there's a queue of like 5 people behind you, you're just like, oh, it's frustrating. And so at one time I was doing tests a while ago while I was building the RFID system, where I had different choices, and just watching people do it, and they would just give up, and they were just like, I'm just going to type it instead, because like I had like a swipe, and I had the barcode, and then like I didn't have the RFID yet. We didn't have the access to that. And it's interesting. I'll just go up front and just watch them as they would try to go in and get help, and just try to learn and do stuff. And most people, they just have it glued to their phone basically, or in the phone wallet, and so tapping is just the easiest thing. It's so natural now. But yeah, good question. Sorry, I don't know who's doing. Maybe you can help me point the next one. Yeah. So other ideas I thought of would be like, so I can't always be in the office, so I have like a little laptop cart. So if people need to check something out, is that, I mean, these are a little bit precious that I'm trying to still get some, and now these are a little bit older technology. So, like the Amazon tax of not getting anything new, it's like now I think they're like $200. But so we could have something so you could do a check-in, check-out type system on there, and that would just log in just, in, out, or something like that. Also thought about it for student workers kind of clocking in and clocking out on there. They kind of have a better system now, but before they used to have to do it by handwritten stuff. But yeah, I think you could think of something else, because again, if they had something else, you could also just type in your username and just have it log. So, the baseline thing is, if we strip away some of this technology, is I just have a place that you can log things. You can log it by hand, you can log it with tapping, you can log it with a swipe. So you could do something like that, and the backend one of just writing that CSV file and just saving that is easy to expand and use and recycle from that. So I could strip that out and just call it a CSV event thing or something like that. But yeah, good question. Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, so just as a post. Oh, it has a carriage return on tap. Yeah. Yeah, there's all like small stuff that we had to like figure out and do, because at one point I was like, well, we could just do like the magnetic strip. It's like we could just have an Excel open and just do that, and then we could just go through, because there's an extra little bit of garbage files and like pull out the 900 number. but it wasn't doing the carriage return. So then I had to like find some free software that would like auto enter after like so many seconds to kind of do. Because I'm like always like trying to stack technology rather than like, let me build my own thing. It's like, let me just try to do all these things. And it was kind of a mess and it didn't really work. And so we still have some of these, the magnetic card ones. And every once in a while, staff member will check it out. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we have this nice thing where all the students, you're gonna make the students get their card out and manually swipe it. It's like, no, don't do that. Good question, thanks. Yeah. Is on demand is what I wanted to do. So at first I was like, oh, I'm just going to do this dump and like, because what I used to do is after an event all the time, they would be like, okay, Jimmy, I need this file. And so then I have to go in SFTP in there and connect to our VPN. And then I'm like, pull it down. I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way. Let me look at Dropbox. So right now I just make it on demand. And so I haven't fully taught too many staff on how to do it because I'm a little scared that they don't, like it's too many steps. Like if they can authenticate themselves, it would be great to do. So currently for different sites, I'll just go in and just press it and then I'll share that Dropbox folder because on the app itself, the folder list has per site name. So it's, whatever, gt.edu for one site and then the next one's like OIE. And so I can just share that folder with those user groups on there. But it's also great if someone manages multiple sites, they know, oh, I can just look right here and Dropbox is good at notifying you like, oh, you have a new file that just came in. So does that make sense? Thanks. So there's not, so that's where I'm like, that's where I was trying to balance out. It was like, well, I could have the staff do that. But instead I'm like, well, because not all the events are going to be tied for different work groups, and I got about 20 Drupal sites. So whoever's putting on the event, they would just go to their website. So if we're doing one for, say, like we have one group called iHouse, and that's the international house where half exchange and half American students live together. So they'll just go to the iHouse website, open up the event page, and it just lives there. So that way we know it's because it's on the iHouse website. So rather than making it like we have a generic website where everyone just goes to like a catch-all, then they would have to like fight over which event happened at what time. I just kind of said, well, we can use Drupal and we can just like drop the modules into everyone's website. And so they can just they just have to remember where their event was at that time. So, I mean, I could do that and change the file name and, Dropbox would be smart enough. I just have to put a little bit more logic into then doing the date. And so I always like, what's the simplest way? We're going to name it just the date it happened. And then that's easy for Dropbox to find. And I can use a little calendar, JavaScript pop out and click on that. But I mean, I go back and forth of that but that requires some foresight. And a lot of times they're scrambling to do that. And so if I can't get staff buy-in for technology to set that up and create their event ahead of time, like, yeah, maybe I could just have it that it does a catch-all by default. There's no event listed. But usually they're just, our staff are just like scrambling, like, oh, we got to set up this event and, catering and other stuff's coming through. And so the technology is always an afterthought. So I'm like, if I make it as easy as possible, I have the most buy-in, then I can show them and their bosses like, here's the data. And now you can do stuff with it. So then they'll be more inclined to do that. So I'm approaching it from that kind of a human perspective of how to get people to buy in for that. Yeah, a bit of a philosophical. Yeah. You kind of given them. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's very true. And it goes back and forth, because at first I thought you were going in the direction of like trying to break of like, oh, it only accepts numbers. And then if I have an error message on that. But really what I did was I dialed back how much information is sent back that shows on the screen. So at first I was like, oh, great. Because if we just had like a laptop like at our front desk that people would, because for a while we had that where if someone needed to come in and get help, we were just like logging all the people that came through. And so you could have a message like, oh, great. And it showed like their name, their email address and stuff. And it's like, well, that's way too much stuff because if someone just manually types in random numbers, they could figure out like their friends. Again, I think there's probably, 500,000 IDs. So they would have to be pretty dialed in to know what their friend's one would be. That's my only concern is that you could potentially figure out someone's 900 number by doing that. in the bigger sense, there's so much data leaks that go on, not just at the university, but other ones that you can probably find people's information by searching different repositories or searching online or what people say on Facebook anyways, that it's like, that's not even, I'm not as concerned on that of like a broader scale. Yes, if someone came like auditors and they're like, tell me about this and why we have it set up this way, it's like, yes, we're going to have to try to do some more safeguards. So, stuff I'm thinking is I might shorten the name and so it just shows like Jimmy and then K and then period and just cut everything else off because the students that's using it is knowing that. But, for the IPs, I think we have around, I think the last count was 200,000 IP addresses for our school. So the range is pretty, I can dial that in a lot and cut off a lot of stuff if need be. And it's really great that, when they hop on like VPN or hop on, since they have to log in with their username, it says, oh, they're a student. So they only get to go into these student range accounts. And then if they're a student worker, they'll cross over to the employee one and they'll go into this one. So I can just kind of add some of these ranges on there. But it is something that I constantly think about, and that's why I'm like, oh, let me do more talks about this so people can challenge my viewpoint. Like maybe there's an obvious flaw I've missed that people can do that. But that's my cybersecurity background where I'm always thinking like, how can I break into the system? How can I find a loophole, and what stuff can I actively exploit? So other stuff I was going to put in would be uploads and then like auto uploading and then deletion of files pretty quickly, so we don't store really anything on there after X number of days. Maybe that's 30 days, maybe that's 90 days. I don't like keeping stuff that long because we can just put it in Dropbox and have that more secure. And then we can let Dropbox worry about it because we have a license agreement with them. And so they'll take control of our data in case there's a leak. So good question. Yeah, early on, before I had this RFID, I had it, so I was like, well, we have a laptop. We could just take a picture of the person because like we were using a different scale of this before COVID where we just had a laptop set up. And I was like, well, because they come for advising. So I was like, oh, we could take a picture. Then you would know what they look like before coming out. But the kind of the privacy aspect of that would probably get me in more hot water. Like, to me, I'm like, great, we could try to do something like that. But also the repository and the database for keeping track of that sounds like a privacy nightmare for us. And we don't have really, US doesn't have as strong privacy laws as other groups, which we still have to respect because we have international students. So I still have to go by EU GDPR. And so I have to put a lot of warnings on all of our data for all of our websites and a lot of legal text on there. And we have gotten requests from EU citizens saying, what's going on with our data? And so then we have to kind of show this stuff on there. So I'm very open-minded. I think we also have one state in Illinois that's, if you use their data without their permission, like biometrics, they can sue you and they will get money. Everyone in the state that will get money for that. I learned about that recently. But yeah, it's a good question. I think the easiest thing would be transition is to use NFC and get that kind of approved and audited, that we could use that on there. But I think that would be a good step going forward. And again, I would love to share that with you. I'd love to come back in a couple years and be like, here's what we're doing now, and talk about stuff like that. But
but yeah, Jimmy will be outside, so you
Yep.
should be able to go and if you have. But yeah.
Sure. About like a day of, I want to go in, I've run a multi-day event, so I have to go and then grab 3 CSV.
Yep.
And then merge that into CRM message.
Yep.
Do you have any plans or like ideas of?
Yeah. I'm working on some stuff. This falls outside of Dropbox, but I'm working on, like, we used to use Mailchimp as our newsletter. They're actually were made by GT grad students, and they're home in Atlanta, but they got too expensive, so we went with a different license. And so I'm trying to automate that to where I can just put stuff in Dropbox and then have it just suck up and put those into one, and then people can review. So we could just have that in different ones, because the easiest thing that staff understand is put it in this folder and magic happens, and that's super easy. And then they can just and then it moves to like a complete one. But you're right. Like I think about that a lot, because this is like our whole thing with our International Education Week. We had 85 events over a week, and it was like sorting through some of that data. We had to kind of know what stuff was happening at once. And I was like, well, let's just stress test this system completely. What kind of nonsense and what kind of stuff can we get up to? And like, what kind of ways can we break it? Because we weren't really trying to track overall for like, we needed to report on that, but just in general, how we can kind of do that. But yeah, that's a good question. Thanks.
Thank you.